This is the Amy Edwards Show, and I'm your host, Amy. This show is here to help all of us live our best life and feel amazing at absolutely every age. We focus on transformation and empowerment through practical tools, strategies, habits, and mindset shifts that will help you unlock your potential, build self-love, and embrace your unique journey. We'll cover everything from health and wellness to personal growth and spirituality with inspiring guests and real conversations. So if you are ready to level up, break out of your comfort zone, and make lasting changes, you're in the right place. It's never too late. In fact, some of your best days haven't even happened yet. Let's get to it. Love this moment and make the next one even shinier.
So today, welcome Susan Morgan Taylor, MA. You are a somatic sex therapist with over 25 years of experience helping couples create deep, lasting intimacy. You're also the creator of the trademarked Pleasure Keys process, which is a framework for transforming your sex life, and the host of the Sex Talk Café Podcast, which I'm definitely going to check out because I was looking through your episodes. You had one on penis enlargement. You had one on vaginal gymnastics called Pompoir. I'm like, Pompoir? I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I'm sold. Amazing. So you also have transformational couples retreats, with the next one coming up March 31st through April 4th in Tennessee, I believe. And you have a free ebook that's available, which I downloaded already and checked out. It's called The Pleasure Keys, and that's on your website. That'll be linked in the show notes. So I'm just saying welcome to you. Thank you for being here. Sex is one of my favorite topics for the show. It's always very popular, and I think it's just because it's such an important part of our life and needs to be addressed more, as I'm sure you know. So as we start, why don't we start with not assuming that anyone knows what somatic sex therapy is, and you go ahead and tell us what that is and what you do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you so much, Amy, for having me and just for having this platform for this conversation. It's so important. So thank you. So somatic is a word that really just means of or pertaining to the body. And so when it comes to somatic sexology, somatic sex therapy, there's actually a lot of different threads that term somatic can cover. But for what I do as a somatic sex therapist, my background is in traditional mental health counseling. I have a master's degree in professional counseling. I spent a decade in private practice as a sex therapist. So my specialty has always been sexuality and sex therapy. But I kind of shifted out of that traditional therapy model because somatic is really about using the body's wisdom and using more experiential ways of helping couples or individuals really meet and greet the thing that's really in the way of their ability to feel more pleasure or a deeper connection, or have more, or get on the same page and really have more fun, ease, and joy when it comes to sex and intimacy. And so a lot of what I do in my couples retreats and my private coaching is really about letting my couples or facilitating my couples to have real experiences of connection and intimacy in real time. Now, that doesn't mean that we're taking our clothes off and getting naked. I'm personally not hands-on touching my clients in the work that I do with somatic sex therapy, though there are threads of the somatic work where hands-on work is part of it and nudity might be part of it. So there's really a lot of threads of that. So I would just really encourage your listeners to do their own research on that out there and maybe look into some of the different threads that are available. But in terms of what I do, I really found that the experiential ways of in real time, like meeting the thing that's actually in the way is far more effective than just talking about a problem or analyzing a problem or conceptualizing a problem when it comes to sex. Sex is an experiential event. It happens in our bodies. That's where the problems actually arise. It's not necessarily a cognitive thing that we can just solve by analyzing it. So I've just found it's a much more effective approach that helps my clients get much better results and lasting results in a it's a more effective way of working when it comes to sexuality specifically.
What does that mean, meeting the problem? Because what was that look like in actuality?
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. Yeah. So for example, here's a real common one that happens is, let's just say, I see this a lot with women. So I'm a specialist also in women's sexuality is really great. Started. I mostly work with couples now. So
tell me when you
start up. Yeah. A lot of women, for example, might not know what they want. That can be a really common, I don't know.
God, I've talked about that on this show ad nauseum. I didn't even know what I wanted, and it's a wild realization. So, yeah.
And that can be the source of a lot of challenges, sexually speaking. And a lot of times underneath the not knowing what I want, let's say, there can be a lot of other things like shame, even guilt. I don't want to be selfish. I don't want to hurt my partner's feelings. I don't really know. So I'm just going to go along with whatever he wants because I don't really know. I don't have access to that. And whatever he wants is fine. But there are a lot of problems come from that because what ends up happening is maybe what's happening to your body isn't really what feels great. So you're going to end up tolerating what's being done. You're going to go along with things. Maybe it's not really where your joy and your pleasure is. So you're not really going to get all the really great hormones that we can get, like oxytocin, all these wonderful things. There's not a whole lot in it for her if she's not really connected with her pleasure and allowing her body to feel pleasure. So that's really the core of this particular challenge. And so what we might do if I was working with a couple like that, we would first start with helping her learn how to access what she wants. And there's different practices and activities that I teach and skills I help my clients learn to do that helps them learn how do I access sensation in my body. So the very first piece of my pleasure keys, it's noticing what's happening in my body. What am I able to notice? What can I feel? Even if a lot of times you're going to get the answer like, well, I feel nothing or I just feel numb. That is something. And anytime I hear that, I'm like, oh, excellent. Great. You feel numbness because I know that under that, when we start to really get present with nothing or numbness, there is a whole well of sensation and feeling that's available to us. So that's the very first step. And so that's sort of an example of it. The core of it is in that example, I don't know what I want and I don't know how to know. And the problem is, so I'm defaulting. And if I'm defaulting to whatever my partner wants, I'm probably not necessarily always enjoying it. So I'm probably going to shut down and lose interest in sex over time. So the solution is how do we create real life experiences where I'm helping you learn how to know what you want?
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
For sure. Because I think for me too, we'll just cover this right quick, but I didn't even understand what the options were. Like, and when I went to my first play party with our mutual friend, Kimmy Inch, friend of the show, and I talked about it on this podcast was, somebody said, would you like a foot massage or a head massage or something like that? And I was like, that's an option? I was like, yes, I like that, And it just was, tame might not be the right word, but it was just like, oh, really? I didn't know that was on the menu. And like anything goes and you just don't even know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know until you take some time to learn how to know what you don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
It's such a game changer. And I think that's another really common thing that happens as well. And so, yes, it's good to know sometimes we do need, here's some choices, here's some options. Do you like this? More than that. And so we have ways that we can set up experiments, touch-based experiments that are non-sexual in nature, where we're experimenting with different types of touch so that we can at least, sometimes that is really helpful to sort of have a reference point, like somewhere to start. But the other challenge that happens a lot is we think that our desires are either not enough or they're too much. Mm-hmm. So it might be like, well, all I really want right now is a head massage, but that's not sexy or that's not really enough. Or my partner wants me to want something, really big and over the top, or it has to be genital touch, or it's not really a valid desire. And that couldn't be further from the truth. So a lot of this process is really learning how to slow down, how to notice, and really making space for whatever it is that arises, that is full and complete in and of itself, that it is enough in and of itself. It doesn't have to be anything more or anything less. And so we learn how to do that work first within ourselves. Can I really give myself the time to slow down, to notice? And once I notice, can I then name? That's the second part. Notice, name, negotiate, or what I call the 3 N's. Can I name it? And if all it is that I just want to hold your hand, I just want you to put your arms around me, I just want a head massage, then can I allow that to be enough without me pushing myself to have to make it something different or more? Other times, the opposite is true. I might be really afraid to name the thing because I'm afraid that it's going to be too big. My partner might be turned off by it, or it might be too much, or he might not want to do it. So both of those things are what get us stuck in sexual relationships, either the fear of being too much or the fear that my desires are not enough.
Yeah, for sure. So you talk a lot, I know, on your website and as I was researching you, about this disconnect that people have in, their desires. And I think that this kind of is an extension of that, right? Like, so say maybe you do want or need and have named maybe a massage or whatever it is. And, you've got a partner that's very conditioned to like straight genital action, and there's that disconnect. How do you start to bridge that and really have the other person listen?
Absolutely. Such a good question. And this is where like the number one question that every couple should know how to answer is this question. We need to know who is it for right now? Whose desire am I following? Because and I know that I'll explain more of what I mean by that this is where a lot of couples go sideways, right? One person wants one thing, the other person wants another. Those two things don't match. They're not wanting the same thing at the same time. So it either turns into a train wreck. It turns into a train wreck of some sort a lot of times. And sometimes that train wreck is just like total avoidance, like the silent train wreck. Like, let's just avoid this whole situation altogether. And there's so much anxiety. Let's just not even try to have sex because it's such a train wreck when we try. But when we know whose desire we are following, that creates clarity. So in that situation, it might be that your partner wants direct genital stimulation, but all you want is to be, let's just say, to be held for a little while with nothing really sexual happening. So we have to know how to negotiate. That's the third person, negotiate that setup. So if we're clear on, okay, right now, I would like to follow my desire. Would you be willing just to follow my desire for a minute? And my desire is such that I just want to be held for a few minutes with no obligation, no pressure. I just want to feel your arms around me. Would you be willing to give that to me? Then the other person can decide, I'm a yes, I'm a no, or I'm a maybe. We can actually then arrange that setup so that we know who's receiving the thing and who's giving the thing. And then there might be an additional piece to that of, great, let's do that for a while. And then let's follow the other person's desire. And then that would be the time where, he could say, oh, I want to be stimulated genitally like this, and that. And we could, arrange, okay, great. Now I'm in a state of, we know who's receiving and who's giving. And we also have the clarity around who is this actually happening for. Does that make sense? Because it's really a huge game changer when couples get it.
I like that. I like that level of communication too. I think that's eye-opening for me too, because the longer I'm in a relationship, the more you get in kind of like just a pattern, right? Or you can. And so those are danger spots probably, because you can start to just get, I just am thinking, I've been married twice and divorced twice. And so I know like the pattern that one of those marriages fell into was really not good, because it was basically just like, here, hop on it. Here's a dick. You know what I mean? Like, and it was just like, I felt like, I just felt like completely discounted. Yeah. And I bet a lot of people can relate to that if they've been in any kind of relationship for any amount of time. Sometimes there's that disconnect. So that's really interesting to think of it as negotiate for whose pleasure. And I think that's the part that I was interested in too, in that, because I want to be respectful of the other person and their desires.
Yeah. And I want to clarify that it's not really because this can be a confusing piece on this conversation here. It's not whose pleasure necessarily, because both people can get pleasure, whether I could be giving something to you. I could be giving you a head massage, and I could be, because it's what you want. Right. Yeah. Susan, give me, I'm like, yeah, Amy, I'm willing to do that. But I could get a lot of pleasure from it. That could feel really good for me to give you that gift. So we could both get pleasure potentially out of that. So we don't gauge it by who's getting, and that's where a lot of couples go, the wires get crossed. Well, I was enjoying it. So was I, but we didn't really have the clarity on who was it happening for. So it's not necessarily about who gets pleasure out of what happens. It's around whose desire are we following at any given moment. That's where the clarity comes. So it's a very fine distinction, but it makes a really, really big difference.
Yeah, you're so right. You're so right. And really just knowing that like making you happy is fulfilling me as well, right? Like that's beautiful.
Yeah, because pleasure is available it's always available whether we're giving or receiving. And I've studied a lot with Betty Martin. I just want to do a shout out to that because she's a huge influence on my work with couples.
I'm not familiar with her. Cool.
Yet to be. Yeah. She really developed a beautiful body of work called The Wheel of Consent. So I have done a lot of training and study with her and found her very early on in my sex therapy career, which is really why I had to shift into the somatic work because it can be such a game changer. And she talks a lot about this as well, that, she has her system of how she describes it, which is really beautiful and elegant. But whether you're in a giving, it doesn't matter whose desire you're following, pleasure is available for both of those people at that time.
Yeah,
whether I'm
for sure.
following my desire or I'm giving and we're following your desire, pleasure is always available. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's required for pleasure to happen for, say, if I'm in the giving role. It is kind of required for the person receiving, because if I'm following your desire, I would hope that it's something that you want that's going to give you joy and pleasure.
Yeah.
Right. So pleasure is a little bit more of a requirement for the person that's making the request or asking for their desire to be met or fulfilled. It's kind of a requirement there. But as the giver, it's available to me. It's not necessarily a requirement, but pleasure is absolutely available. I can definitely get a lot of joy out of giving a gift to my partner, doing something, let's say, that he asked me to do for him for his pleasure. That can give me a lot of joy as well. There's so much on this conversation that we could get into.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated. I'm fascinated by it just because of my own experiences and even just questions that came up literally today. And, the way that Justin was viewing it, that's my partner, fiance, and the way that I was viewing it. And I had to explain to him, I can't relax to have sex in the morning when I am worried about what time it is and I don't have a handle on my day. And I was like, I'm not going to be in a mental space that's even going to, that's a good spot. And he was like, oh, so you have to get things done before you can do this? And I was like, well, no, not exactly. Do you know what I mean? Like, sometimes there's this mental thing that we were
Totally
disconnected on.
Yeah. Well, I love what you just described, because what you just did was you noticed what the thing was that was sort of coming up for you, and you named it. And from there,
Thanks.
that's validated.
I appreciate it.
I don't know. And so from there, it can become so there's different things that we can do on the negotiation part. I mean, it sounds like Justin kind of came up with some ideas like, oh, is this what you need? So that's part of it too. We can negotiate with our partner. We can explore options like, okay, yeah, or maybe I just need to kind of look at my to-do list real quick and then I can be, I don't know what it is. But that's the negotiation part. The other part of the negotiation is slowing down. And I will do this with myself all the time. I don't always get an answer from myself, but what do I need right now? What would I need? Or you could ask yourself this, what would I need so that I could be available for sex in the morning for my partner? If I were willing to provide that and try to be in that space, is there something that I could ask for or give to myself so that I could be available for this connection?
Yeah.
And so again, this is all what it really comes down to is clarity. When we have clarity, we have connection and we have confidence. And that's literally the anatomy of pleasure. That's where pleasure and connection and depth and fun and joy and ease and all these things that people really want when it comes to sex, that's how that is literally created. We have the power to create that consciously and on purpose.
What was it? Clarity, what? Confidence?
So clarity, when we have clarity, there's clarity in the relational space. There's clarity around what am I feeling? What am I wanting? What am I needing? Who is this happening for? Whose desire are we following? Mine or my partner's? Have that clarity.
Whose desire are we following? Yeah.
So that was kind of your partner's. That was Justin's desire, right? He wanted to have sex in the morning. So you were going to be in a state of, am I willing to feel that desire or not? I guess no, maybe.
I didn't.
That's okay. I didn't turn it down. There's a path forward here, or a way that we can have more nuance in our connection and our communication with our partner when it comes to sex. It doesn't have to be like end of the story, it's not happening.
Right.
Right. And it's okay if that's what was true for you at that moment. No judgment there, right? But the clarity, when we have that and when we have the skills to know how to get to that place of clarity, that creates confidence and connection. And that's what I find that most people are really desiring when they're having challenges in sex. They want more confidence and they want deeper connection. At least the couples that come to me, that work with me, that's largely what they're looking for. And they want to get on the same page in sex. And so
I think so many times if we're honest with ourselves, that's it,
Yeah.
We all desire this if we're willing to admit it,
Yes. The connection.
Tell me a little bit about how you got into this, because I understand that you had your own sexual awakening. And personally, I think being a sex therapist must be I would love to be a fly on the wall. It must just be fascinating work. So tell me a little bit about how you got here.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I almost created a program called Fly on the Wall because I've heard people say That'd be great. Wow.
Oh my God, so good. You could do it anonymously as like a TikTok, and you just like share little stories, just like,
Really.
oh my God.
So yeah, it's interesting. I did not know I was going to end up in the field of sexuality. It's not like I was 6 years old, like want to be a sex therapist when I grow up, but I did always know I wanted to help other people, and I did always know that it really at my core I am a healer. I always knew that I wanted to be a counselor, a therapist, or some type of helping professional where I'm really contributing to other people's well-being and growth. And it was 2000, let's see. Well, 2011 was when I really like my whole life changed in 2011. I had left a sexless marriage of 10 years, and I was the one who was totally not interested in sex in that marriage. I always like to clarify that in my story because when people hear that, they think that it was the other way around. Well, I actually was the one I lost interest in sex altogether. I had 2 little kids. There was a lot of stress in that marriage, a lot of just contextual things that were going on that really caused my sex drive just to completely go offline. However, the really interesting thing is that I still really longed for sexual connection. In the sex that we were having, there was something more that I wanted that I didn't know how to name and I didn't know how to get it. I wanted more depth, more connection, more spirituality, not like this feeling of just sex, and lots more orgasms, by the way, is not the solution. I could have plenty of orgasms, but there was still like just something missing for me. And I didn't know how to create it. So, I just did what any woman would do and I blamed my husband, like, right? Like before you know better. So I just kind of blamed him for, well, he's just doesn't know how to take me there or whatever. He's just not a good lover, whatever the thing was I told myself. So fast forward, that marriage ended.
How long did you go without sex?
It could have been 6. I mean, I could have cared less. 6 months.
Okay.
At a time. Yeah. And then we did. And it was probably over in 10 minutes. And, and I didn't know. I just didn't know. That was all I knew was on the menu, like, okay, I'd have lots of orgasms. You had yours and cool. Right. I just didn't know that anything else was available. Yet I had heard about things like full body orgasms. And I'd had this just something in me that's like, I know that more is possible. And my heart wanted more. I wanted to feel like opened into love and like connected to the divine through sex, So fast forward a couple of years and I'm in a new relationship. And this guy was like, he had studied sexuality. He allegedly had all these sexual skills. And he's like, oh, you want a full body orgasm? I will just give that. I'll make your body do all kinds of things that you've never experienced. And I'm like, sign me up. Like, this is great. Right? Like, finally, I'm going to have these things that I've always wanted to feel. And this is going to be awesome. Okay. He did not deliver. It was
when you said allegedly, when you threw the word allegedly in there, I was like, okay.
Yeah, should have been a red flag. But hey, I was up for the adventure, and okay. So that relationship kind of ended almost as quickly as it began. But where it left me was this realization of I realized that I had always made the man responsible for my pleasure. And I thought, wow, this guy came in like, oh, I'm going to make your body like feel all these things and this and that and have these kind of orgasms. I'm like, well, hang on a minute. It's my body. He thinks he could do that to me. Then surely I could find the pathway within myself to make that happen within my own body. So I made a declaration one winter day in Austin, Texas, where I was living at the time. It's 2011, December. I believe it was a Tuesday morning, nice and cool, crisp air, sun shining through the window. And I just said to the universe, I'm like, I am going to figure this out. I'm going to undertake the study of my own sexuality. I'm going to freaking figure it out. And that's what I did. And as soon as I did that, amazing things started happening. I had like books that jumped off the shelf at me at the yoga studio. I had a chance encounter with a somatic sex therapist that absolutely changed my life. And a few weeks later, one of the things I had decided to do in this self-discovery process was I made what I called a pleasure date with myself. So I called it a pleasure date, but it was literally I'd mark off 2 hours on my calendar once a week, light candles, put on music, get naked. And I would take time with my own body. I would connect. I would slow down. And I got rid of this whole goal-oriented way of masturbating and this goal-oriented way of, how we get so goal-oriented around sex. It's all about the climax and the orgasm. And even when we masturbate, a lot of times that's just because that's all we know, right? Yes. So I said, I'm just going to lay that all aside. I'm just going to slow down. And I'm just going to start to notice what am I able to feel in my genitals. And what was so interesting is that I didn't have a lot of sensation. I had a lot of numbness. which was weird because I could have lots of orgasms. But when I really slowed down and really got present, there wasn't a lot that I could feel when I touched myself there. So I started just very slowly just get really present with the numbness. And what started to happen was I just sort of softened towards that. And I love to use the word embrace. I just softened towards the nothing. I embraced it. I started to feel a whole lot of frustration and then anger and rage and then massive amounts of just grief and sadness that I would have these sessions where I would just start crying. And I would sob and sob and sob and cry. And all this energy moving from my genitals up and like kind of out through my heart, like all these places where it wasn't safe to feel in my heart. I had shoved it down and just gone numb in my pussy. It's so interesting how we do that as women. And women's sexuality, we're very tied into our emotions. So I had really gone into this shutdown that I didn't even know was numbing out my sex drive, my libido, and my ability to even feel sensations. The interesting thing that happened was as I started to do that and just let myself kind of have what my body needed, I started to feel more down there until one day, just a few weeks into this experiment, I had a experience where I had waves of sensation. This was so crazy. It started at the bottom of my feet, rolled up through my whole body, and then like shot out of my heart, like these waves of pleasure rolling through my whole body. My hands were like vibrating. My face felt numb. And all this love like poured out of my heart. Just love, pleasure, pleasure, pleasure. And I realized I'm having this full body orgasm, right? And I'm like, and it was that moment right then and there. I was in graduate school actually at the time, getting my master's degree in professional counseling. I'd had this life-changing experience with the somatic sex therapist. And then this is happening. And I'm like, oh my God, I am love. I am orgasm. Like, it's not something that any man can like give to me on a platter. Nobody can bring this to me. It's literally something that naturally exists within our bodies when we've sort of moved through or removed. I like the word kind of moved through the obstacles that are in the way to our knowing ourselves as that, to being able to access those kind of states. So that was when I made this declaration that I'm absolutely going to be a sex therapist. I'm absolutely going to specialize in women's sexuality, because if more women knew this, the world would be a much better place. Women would be getting pleasure for one and having good sex, and that would make the men happy. And the world is a different place when we're in our pleasure and we're having sex and making love in a way that is really fulfilling at a soul level, not just sort of the stuff, whatever was missing for me in my marriage. Like I had found it in that experience just by going within myself and learning how to kind of clear out those things that were in the way of my ability to know myself as love, pleasure, and orgasm.
Oof, that is so beautiful. Thank you for sharing all that. I can relate to so much of that because it was, again, that personal work that I did as well. And I'm wondering, when you were crying during that process, what did you feel like you were crying about? Did you have anything? Was it a grief like, oh, I'm not capable? Or was it realizing your own obstacles? What do you think that was?
Yeah. So what I'll answer to that is that it sort of changed as I started to just surrender into it. I think at the beginning, there was a lot of grief that was about something. I had lost my father when I was 1 week shy of my 23rd birthday, and I was very close with him.
Sorry.
Yeah. And so there was a lot of that I contacted. And there was no real grieving that happened. My family was very emotionally reserved. And so I had held in a lot of that. Like, we need to cry and grieve. And so I just held that in. So I contacted a lot of that. And then I think there was some grief, around the ending of my marriage, even though I felt like that was the right thing to do. It was still the father of my children, my best friend for 10 years, so there was content to the grief. But eventually there was no content to it. It was just energy. There was no story attached. It was just energy that needed to move through me. And I think that that's a really important point to drive home, because what I hear a lot of people say, a lot of women will be like, well, but I don't know why I'm crying. I shouldn't be crying because there's no reason to cry. Or their partners will be like, well, why are you crying? What's it about? Did I do something? Did I say something? Was it? We don't need to have the story. And honestly, better to not get into the story, because the story, if we're too stuck, the story is part of our mental energy. And so if we're grabbing onto the story, a lot of times that's kind of what keeps it stuck in our bodies, sort of recycling and rotating. And it's very hard to allow it to kind of shift and move into a different state because it's just energy. So the more that we can sort of get away from the mind having to come in and attach a story to it, we can just be in the pure sensation, the pure feeling. That's really where orgasm comes in. All of our emotions are life force energy, even the anger and all of them, anger, rage, frustration, fear, pleasure, sadness, all of those are tied into our life force energies. So the more that we just embrace that, it actually can then shift into erotic energy because that's actually what it is.
That's so good. So good. Because so many times we try to make sense of whatever it is. And just opening up to like, I don't have to say what it is. I don't have to name that necessarily. And you don't even have to know like that. I've done that at different points in my life. And that's really powerful to just allow. That's an opening up that's in a whole different way that can serve you in ways that we can't even imagine.
You can't even imagine. And we rarely ever ask, well, why are you happy? Why are you joyful?
That's right.
You said, why are you crying? Why, like we don't ask the why for all the positive stuff. So really it's, the path of unifying the opposites is about embrace, where it's just, we just say yes to everything that is, whether we consider it positive or negative, like that's how we create separation. And that's a quality of our mind, separating the two. One is good, one is bad. And when we're in that, we're not in connection. So if we want more connection in our lives and in our, our intimate relationships, the first place we go is that connection internally with, can I say yes to everything that's arising in my body right now without the need to run away or run towards it even. I'm in a state of neutrality, which is love and peace. Can I just be in embrace with what's arising and say yes and surrender towards that? That's the path of orgasm and orgasmic. So not climax is like what we tend to think of orgasm. The orgasmic path is that embrace of all that's there and our ability to say yes and feel it fully and allow it to animate through us and then change form into whatever it turns into next.
You having had that experience of noticing, oh my gosh, I don't feel anything, that must really serve your work so well because I was thinking when you described a woman saying, I feel nothing, I'm numb, and you saying, that's great, that's something. You not only have experienced it, but it just must be so validating for her to hear that and say, am I normal? That's okay. And, that's something.
Yeah. Of course she's normal. And that's the other place where we get tripped up is it's sort of this idea that I have to, what I'll hear a lot of women say, especially around self-pleasure, oh, I didn't feel anything and it didn't work. Okay. It works because you're trying to produce some kind of result from that experience when it's really a big mental shift, a mindset shift. We have to look at it in terms of not trying to get anywhere. So I'm not trying to feel anything. And I'm not trying to get to an orgasm. What I'm doing instead is I'm just noticing what's available to me right now. And so what I would say to a woman who's like, I don't feel anything is, yes, I've been there. And that's how I know that there's like everything is underneath nothing. Everything.
That's beautiful. I love that. That's so good for people to hear. Yeah.
Yeah. So slowing down and just if you stay present with the numbness, what happens a lot of times, and I know this was true for myself, I encountered a lot of frustration because I was trying to feel. I was efforting to try to feel. And so then there's frustration happening because I'm trying to make something happen. However, the beauty of that is that's not nothing. Now I'm feeling frustration. That's not nothing. And see how quickly we just shifted out of that? Yeah. And so it's moment by moment saying yes and the slowing down and getting rid of the idea that we have to get anywhere because that numbness will shift very, very quickly. And maybe it shifts into sadness. I don't know. But like if you just say yes to that, there's the next thing right there next to it or under it.
Let's talk about hetero couples right now. That's the relationship that I happen to be in. And of course, a lot of things I'm sure would work for any couple, but men have a lot of, I think, I'm generalizing, but they can be impatient with getting to it. The intercourse part of it, like this is what sex is. And do you find that slowing down is a challenge for men?
I think it can be for a lot of men, but it also is for women for a different reason. But yeah, it can be for a lot of men. But I think when men can understand how much more there is in it for them when their partners are actually opened and engorged. Oh my gosh. relaxed, they're
Yes.
going to get access to so much more of her energy, which is what they really want anyway, ultimately.
I mean, yes, that's the funny part, right? Like, oh, you want that? This is how you get it, honestly. Like,
Right.
really, it's the key. You talk about pleasure keys, like it's the key that unlocks that. And
Yeah.
I feel like it's a practice with a couple, at least in my experience. It has been a practice to like, oh yeah, remember this is
Right.
the trick to not trick, but this is the process that can really serve, you know.
It serves men too, because the whole men, there tends to be a real attachment to the climax. And
Yeah.
typically more so, you see that more so for men than women. And there's reasons for that. But that's some of what's going on. But what I've seen is like for men, their lives can absolutely change too if they take on a practice of masturbation or self pleasure where they're not doing it just to get off, but they're also doing it let's just have an experiment. What if climax isn't the goal of my masturbation session? And instead, the goal is to notice sensation and slow down and to build my arousal and to back off to, like, it's called edging. I'm sure you've heard of that.
Mhm.
And the goal isn't to have an ejaculation or ejaculatory orgasm. What can happen for men when they really take that on as a practice, they then get access to the more female types of orgasm that are more full bodied, that are less genitally focused, and that also can be much more expansive than just sort of that 30-second
Yeah.
a second or minute of pleasure that happens through the genitals. So they get access to a whole other realm of pleasure and experience. And then when they do, if they do choose to ejaculate, they can have much more expanded and longer, sort of more linear types of orgasms, what I call climax, and what most
Yeah.
traditional orgasm, they can have more expanded and extended and more powerful orgasms. So there's a lot in it for men as well to learn how to slow down and be more present in their bodies and in their genitals.
That's so interesting too, as a woman, because if he doesn't come, like finish, I have stories attached to that. Like, oh
Right.
shit, I didn't do my job. Like, and so that is like a little pattern for me to break too. And I've noticed times, and I'm like, is he going to be unhappy, or I'm attaching these stories to it, and then I have to let go of that because he's fine. He's fine, and I know that I have not come plenty of times before in my life and been fine, right?
Right.
So
It's interesting. Yeah, both men and women get attached to the other's orgasm. So a lot of times, right, for women, it'll be like, well, and it's true for men too, but for women, you'll hear things like, oh, maybe I'm not sexy enough. Maybe he's not
Right.
attracted to me. Maybe it must be me. Something's wrong with me. And so now I need to do whatever I can do to get him to come, right? And then for men, it's similar, but it can be, again, like, oh, they get very attached to the female orgasm for obvious reasons.
oh my gosh,
Yeah.
yes.
But it can be like, oh, I'm not a good lover. Or like, I didn't, something's wrong with me. I failed. And so there's a whole like baggage that we bring into that we attach to the climax that really we need to kind of work through that within ourselves and within the relational space if we want to have a new experience in sex. So it's totally fine if you're not interested in creating something new. Like, don't worry about implementing any of this. But if you want to have a different type of experience and expand your range of what's available, then this is something that I think it's a non-negotiable, is learning how to have a different approach to sex.
And is part of that in your work with couples, working on yourself solo?
Well, yeah, and that the solo work is really yes, there's an aspect of it that is solo work, but primarily why that's important relationally is because we have to be connected here, what I call like the vertical alignment, like within myself, my higher self, universe, like this place here, this domain. What do I feel? What do I want? What do I need? Because that's what creates the clarity relationally, so that when I go to another human, I'm actually if I'm deeply connected with myself, now I can have a connection with another. Where we go wrong, I think, is we're trying too quickly to go horizontal into the connection, into the relationship. And I don't feel connected. I'm trying to connect, but we're not clear here first. So we have to do this work first. And then there's a whole different set of skills for how you do that in the relational space, and how we start to navigate differences in sexual desire, differences in desire, how we generate more connection or more polarity in the relational space. So that's sort of a different set of practices, which always work better when both people are kind of clear vertically first before we go horizontal, if that makes sense.
Oh, for sure. No, I totally agree. And then, so what are some practices that we can do with our partner? I know that you've already mentioned some about, different ways that we can name things, but what are some maybe exercises that you can do that people could put into practice?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the very, very simplest one would be to practice having sex without the goal of climax. Because that's something that people could do like right away and, don't have to teach a whole, whole class on it right now, which I would love to do, but we have limited time. Removing climax is the goal during masturbation and or also during sexual intercourse with your partner. What would be different if you just decided to not make that the goal and you slowed down a little bit and you just started to breathe together? That's another thing you can do is synchronize your breathing. You can make eye contact and just get rid of this idea that you have to get anywhere in sex. So sometimes I'll say to my couples, like, just schedule an intimacy date where you get naked. It's nonverbal. There's no talking. You lay in bed. Whatever happens, happens. It doesn't have to go anywhere. There's no agenda. It doesn't have to turn sexual. It's not going to turn into talking about the kids or work. We're going to make it nonverbal. And you're going to just make eye contact. You're going to breathe. You're going to notice your body. A simple thing that you could do too, this one's real easy, is you could just have a practice where you just, I notice this right now. So you each take a turn. So if I was doing this with you, Amy, I would say, oh, I notice a warmth in my heart right now. And then it would be, and then and then you say, yeah. So we would just share noticing. So that's a nice way to bring, and that's a little bit verbal, but it's keeping that focus kind of here, that vertical, but then we're going relational with the sharing, the naming of it and the sharing. And then we're witnessing one another. I can witness the warmth in your heart or just that you're feeling that. And we take turns back and forth. So that's a beautiful thing. If your mind needs something to do initially, that's a really lovely practice to incorporate, but to get rid of that goal and just to soften, surrender, and to just be with whatever is there. It doesn't even have to be anything in particular. It can be whatever it is. That's a hard skill to develop. Just to let
Isn't there like a massive energetic payoff with that? Like you're flowing in it then like more and more, and you and your partner are there together. I mean, seems like.
I think so. I mean, I know that I've had some of the most insane orgasmic experiences from having this new, different approach to sex where it's about slowing down and noticing sensation instead of about trying to get to climax. So we open the gateway to all different kinds of orgasmic experiences potentially by getting rid of the goal of orgasm, by slowing down, by learning to notice, by being more embodied, less so in the mental space of fantasy. That's all great. Fantasy is wonderful. It's super fun, but it's easy to get overly dependent on that as a way to like, quote unquote, get off. So the reframing of it is, okay, I'm just going to kind of set my tendency for that aside and let me just be in my body, just noticing sensations. It's a little bit of a slower path because most of us need a lot of work to get out of our heads and be more embodied. So it can take a little longer. And I think a lot of men are afraid, like, I don't feel enough, I'm going to lose my erection. And that actually might happen. But if you have a long-term vision on this of like, we're creating something new together and this is an experiment, we can always go back to the old way. We know that path easy, right? You have to have this idea that we're working on this together as our sexual relationship so we can have just something new, a new experience together. Losing the erection's not a big deal. It's going to come back online. We don't need to be so attached to always needing to have a constant erection all the time. It can come and it can go. And once you develop more sensitivity, it will stick around a lot longer.
But I mean, too, an energetic payoff in your life, like the way that you're living life, the way that you're connecting with people and you're living in this more eros, energy.
Yeah, like being more turned on and more alive. Absolutely, man. I mean, I don't know. I can only speak for myself on that, but I'm sure you can relate. Like that feeling of just like wanting to fuck the whole universe.
I mean, that's awesome, right? So awesome.
Like, take the whole world in. Like, that's the feeling from the feminine perspective when we're really open in our sex. Not that you want to like fuck all the people in it, but like you just want to draw life like into your body. Like, that's really the feeling. And it's just like erotic and hot and alive and radiant. You know, that's our gift as women, is that radiance that we can bring when we're really opened in our erotic energy.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a pathway to this magnetic vibrance, you know, that we can exude. And so it's like just that energetic option or payoff is pretty enticing, if you ask me.
Pretty hot.
It's pretty hot
too.
Yeah, pretty hot.
I know a lot of times I hear, especially with women, they get afraid that if they awaken sexually, that then they're going to attract all kinds of negative attention from men. And what's really interesting is I found the opposite to be true. Like, it's when we're disconnected from the lower half of our body and from our sexual life force, when we're sort of shut off from that, that's when other things can get in because we're not inhabiting it. When we're really in it and inhabit it, we are so freaking powerful. I mean, if anything, I have scared more people away. I've attracted negative attention. You know, in the past, like, men would be like, whoa, that's a bright light. Like, I don't know what to do with that. Like, they're just going to run, you know?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, you're standing in your power. And that is like
beautiful.
Really something, you know, it makes you like not fuckable with, right?
Exactly.
Fuckable and not fuckable with.
Fuckable, but not in that way.
That's right. So I want to touch back on what you said about climax versus, you know, just that orgasmic state. And one thing that I struggled with, or I don't really like the word struggle, but that I got in my head about was I had interviewed a lot of different people. Probably this was years ago on this show. And they were talking about, like one woman in particular, she's fabulous, but she said, you know, I'll have my solo pleasure practice and I'll have like 8 orgasms and blah, blah. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, I just felt like a failure. And I told myself a new story that I needed to count my orgasms or something. And like other people go like, I had 50 orgasms. And I'm like, okay, like that's never been something I could say. I don't even understand how you count them or what they're counting as one. I don't know, you know, and like, but I have, you know, had experiences with myself and with my partner where I reach a state of where I'm just off in space for an extended period of time. And like, just, you know, your body is just part of the stars, right? And so that, or you're connected to God or whatever. But yeah. So I guess I just want to let people know you're not a failure if you're not counting 50 orgasms.
Oh my gosh, I'm definitely not a failure. And I think that's where the advice out there that just have bigger and more orgasms, which people think is the solution to the problems they're having in their sex lives, it's not the solution. I mean, I could have like 7 or 8, like one right after the other in my marriage, and I was like totally unfulfilled. Like there was something missing for me. So 50 orgasms, I mean that's cool if you're on like an orgasmathon and you're trying to I don't know, maybe there's some competition out there. That really all that is speaking to is that linear, what we call orgasm is really climax, right? And it's the linear path where there's the 4 stages, the build up, the release, the plateau, and then the whatever, what do they call it? The recovery phase or whatever. There's a refractory, right? So you have sort of that stair stepping up, and then big explosion, then you kind of come down the other side of the hill. That's only one type of orgasm. And sadly, most of our Western sexology is built on that model. And I find that extremely limiting. And I think even some really well-known sex educators out there who have written some really wonderful books on the topic, there's sort of, that's all that they're really basing their information on. And there's so much more available. And they're going to say also that, a vaginal orgasm is really just or a G-spot orgasm is really just a clitoral orgasm because the clitoris has legs that goes deeper into the vagina than most people realize. And no, I'm telling you, a cervical orgasm, a G-spot orgasm, these are very, very different types of experiences from a clitoral or more traditional climactic type of orgasm. If any woman has ever had one, you're going to understand it's not the same pathway. Neither is sort of a full body experience, or what's called a valley orgasm, which is waves of like really cool energy that ripple through the body. These are different pathways, which is why I like the term orgasmic instead of orgasm, or just calling orgasm climax, because that's only one type. And so that's actually really, generally speaking, for most people, the easier type to have, because it's all about tightening up the body, creating lots of tension, lots of excitement, and then you release and it's great. And then you can do it all over again. So that type tends to be a little bit more familiar and a little easier, versus when we're cultivating a state of orgasmicness. An orgasmic state is like what you're describing, Amy, where your body is just like, we don't have a body anymore, and I'm out there in the stars, right? And like, as in, I don't know. I mean, I've had experiences where I've had waves of energy shoot up and out my heart, or up into my brain, or like, I will take that any day over just a genital climax. Like, they're totally different experiences. And if we're so stuck on this idea that an orgasm looks a certain way, feels a certain way, is defined by these 4 stages, that's what we're going to look for when we say orgasm. So naturally, some people are going to feel left out of that if that's not your experience in sex.
Yeah. So I've been doing this series on midlife and just letting go of all these stories that we've subscribed to. And that falls into that, right? Like, it's just this looking for, okay, I've just decided this is true and this has been my experience, but I'm hearing these other things. Like, maybe I can open up to letting go of these old stories and really just.
Yeah. I love that. I'm so glad you're taking space on that platform, because it is so true. One of the myths is that as we get into menopause, perimenopausal, postmenopausal, women over 50, that somehow we just aren't sexual anymore and we lose interest in sex, and our sex dry. Yeah, we get dry. Oh, that's why I started the Palm 4 practice. Let me tell you. I mean, yeah, I was like, I fucking refuse to like get dried up, and I'm not going to be one of these women that like has pain when I'm in my 50s. I'm not doing that. So I started.
Can we do a second episode just on that?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, please.
That's changed my life. Yes,
absolutely. Good. I'm in.
But you're right. Like, yeah, it's really not true. And you're right. Like you say, Amy, let's unsubscribe from that BS, because it's really not what has to be true. We've been fed that by culture and society, and it's just not. We don't have to buy that bill of goods.
No, not at all.
We get hotter and sexier. My sex drive is just as crazy as it was when I was like in my mid 30s, in my late 40s now. Like, yeah, I mean.
Yeah, I decided that just the term midlife needs a whole rebrand, because gross. Like, no, it's max life.
It's like that.
Thank you.
Like that. Yeah. It's an upgrade. Yeah.
It is. It really, truly is. I reject those labels and stories and all of that.
I'm not going to use that one. I'll give you credit for that's great. Yeah, because, we have so much more wisdom by this stage of life as women, and we know our bodies, and we're just like, we don't take any BS anymore.
Absolutely.
We're just not going to settle like maybe we would have when things were different in our earlier years,
Oh, for sure. And you know what? We can thank that version of ourselves. We can thank those, because just like you never know where it's going to lead, just like your experience, it fed you into this understanding for that probably serves your couples that you work with so well.
Yeah. Absolutely. Walking the path. I don't teach anything that I have not personally done myself and experimented with myself, because I just think it's so important that we've walk the walk, don't just talk the talk.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, everything I talk about on the show, I like work to walk the walk of. What have we missed that we need to get to today?
Yeah, what I think I would just love to leave your listeners with is that there's a lot of shame around seeking help around sexual challenges. And this, I'm glad this is why I do podcasts, because it's a way to get the message out there. It's the way to normalize this. Everybody faces challenges from time to time when it comes to sexuality. And it's not shameful. There's support out there. And I think one of the best ways to find options for that is to tune into podcasts like this and these platforms like what you're hosting, to educate yourself, to learn, and to be willing, I think also be willing to mess up, be willing to have bad sex when you're trying new things, to bring bring humor into it, bring curiosity. We can bring so much seriousness into sex. It just doesn't need to be there. So that's what I would love to leave your listeners with, is just to keep an open mind, to stay curious, to be willing to be brave, and to know that A, help is out there, and B, like, you're not broken and there's nothing wrong with you. And if you seek support for it, like you're way ahead of most other couples out there already just in doing that. I
Oh
think
my
that's a really
gosh. I
important
always
message.
I always say that with the show. I'm like, you showed up, right? You showed up to learn. So just that curiosity, the universe is going to answer that. I'm a big believer, right? It's going to be like, just like when you decided you had books jumping out at you and whatever else, right?
Yes.
Just as long as you show curiosity, the answers are going to start to find you. And
Well,
so just keep showing up, right? In those
keep showing
ways.
up.
Hmm.
Yeah, and develop that quality of innocence. Innocence is really about not being attached to any one way of doing anything.
Oh, I
So to
love
be
that.
It's the open mind, it's the
Hmm.
ability to experience new things without judgment and to just have the experience rather than trying to analyze the experience. It's what a lot of us tend to do. I liked it, I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Let's just have the fucking experience and experience it, and see what it's about because you never know where it could lead. And when we kind of can quiet the mind in our need to sort of assess mentally,
Yeah.
we can really experience something that we can access different things that we wouldn't be able to otherwise if we're just too ingrained in a certain mindset or we have a whole bunch of ideas about something before going in.
Oh my gosh, so true. And that's so beautiful. That's again attaching to stories and letting go of that and just finding that space where I can just be open, right? And just I think that's just such a beautiful quality and it keeps us youthful in ways that we can't even predict and see coming. So it's really
That's a
cool.
good point. Very true.
So cool. So your pleasure keys, trademark pleasure keys, is a book, an ebook, I guess your pleasure keys process. You have an ebook that's free that I downloaded. It's on your website, comes right away, and I highly recommend it. So everybody can go there and continue this learning with you. And we're going to do another episode. So yeah.
Yes, let's do another episode for sure.
Yeah.
Yes, the ebook is easiest to grab a copy at pleasurekeys.com. It'll take you right to that download page for the ebook. So that's a great spot. And then we've got the retreat coming up too.
Yes.
So I do
Tell me about that.
I am so excited. So I do couples retreats. These are immersive experiences where I really take couples deep into the experience of how to get back on the same page and intimacy through, we were talking about the experiential practices and like, what are they and what do you do? That's what we do over a course of 3 days and 4 nights. Our next one's coming up at the end of March 31st through April 4th of 2025, but I will do several of these a year. That's the goal anyway. And we're going deep into the practice of connection and of learning how to notice, name, negotiate, the 3 ends of the pleasure key process so we can have that clarity and really learn how to have mutually satisfying intimacy for the long term by developing these skills in a very experiential way in an immersive format. Our next one's in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, by the way, at the foot of the Smoky Mountains. It is so stunningly beautiful in that part of the world. If you haven't been there, it's one of the most beautiful places on the planet, in my opinion. So we've got that happening, and the information on that lives on my website at pathwaytopleasure.com is my main website with all the information for all my offerings, and the retreat information is there under couples retreat.
Great. That'll all be in the show notes. Do people stay on site for the retreat or are they in a hotel or how's that work?
Yeah, so we have a beautiful cabin with mountain views, and it's all on site. So all inclusive lodging and food and all programming right on site in one spot with lots of free time. So I love to just kind of I teach from like 9 to 2 or 3, and then the whole afternoon and evenings are open because I just think people need time to really relax and to get out into nature or go into town and do stuff or do their connection exercises. So lots of time to really relax and rejuvenate, but it's also something that really moves the needle for couples. And that format I find is really one of the most effective. Getting away from like the day to day and the busyness of life, it's easier to make big leaps and make more progress when you're just really in an intensive format like that. I believe I've seen that happen anyway.
Yeah, for sure. And then when they leave, like, yes, they're in their spot to learn and everything. Do you recommend that they set up like a sex date every week or a time to really practice this every week? Like what's the
Yes, I really am a big believer in like ongoing support after people do really intensive experiences like that because I think that's missing sometimes. You do these amazing immersion experiences and there's like, oh, how do we integrate this? So I do offer ways to continue to work with me beyond retreat, monthly group programs, private coaching. There's different ways to do that. Aside from that, yes, I would recommend that the couple absolutely be intentional about it create intentional space where you're practicing in a contained way, because that's what helps us just develop the skills. A lot of people will try to immediately go right on the fly and implement, which is okay, but it's better to really get the skills solid, and then we become masters, and then it's easy to like implement it on the go. It becomes sort of second nature once you really get it. And that is a very important part of the long term. If you really want to have that change for the long term, it's like if you want to have a six pack, you got to keep going to the gym, right?
Yeah.
You can't just like go to the gym, get a six pack, and then like not work out ever again.
I wish. I mean, if only,
I know,
right?
right?
But just nothing works that
Work
way.
that way.
Everything requires maintenance and practice for some reason. So, of course, this is the same way, but it's good stuff. It's fun stuff. It's pleasure. It's energy, and it's so incredibly important. So, thank you for all that you do. I'm so grateful for this episode today, and so looking forward to our second one. So, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Amy. It's been a pleasure to be here, and I can't wait for our second episode as well.
Oh my gosh. Everything will be in the show notes, and I cannot wait. You are a joy to talk to, and I just am so grateful for all that you do and all that you shared today. So thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for being here today. I'm so grateful you were here. Again, like she said, I've said this so many times, you just showing up is showing that you're curious. It's opening you up in a whole new way. And the universe is going to answer all of those curiosities and present things in your path that you can't even predict. And that is so incredible. So keep showing up for your highest, best self and your next version, whatever that looks like. And I'm just so beyond grateful. Please rate, review the show, all those things, subscribe to it, follow. And you can find me or DM me at Real Amy Edwards on Instagram. Or, of course, you can respond to any of my emails if you're not on the email list yet. Just get in and you'll stay up to date with our next episode, too, me and Susan. So I can't wait. It's at amyedwards.com or amyedwards.info. So thank you so much for being here today. Thanks to my hair sponsor, The Collective ATX. And thanks to you. Keep shining bright. Till next time.
Thank you so much for being here. Please rate, review, and follow us. And we'd love to hear your feedback. Keep shining bright.